Okay, for our last panelist, let's bring on Cindy Durning from Scholastic.
Thanks very much, Rob. I can use the books too. It's a tall crowd here. Okay, before I start, I would like to give a shout out to my team, my wonderful team at Scholastic, who for the last 2 years has done 2 jobs, their normal day job and the implementation of a system-wide HR system. And a fond hello to my former teammates and colleagues at Columbia University in the bright lights, big city of New York. The title of my presentation today is Human Resources in 2012 in the Shadow of a Destabilized World. Does anyone in this room doubt that we're in a destabilized world? Okay, we are in a destabilized world, there's no question about it. And so my focus today will be what can we do, what can HR do to help employees become more engaged, more satisfied with what they're doing, more committed to your companies and institutions. So first I'm going to take you through a little a trip down memory lane. Some of you in the room here will be old enough to remember the 70s and 80s, the heyday of human resources, when there were much greater investments in people as corporate assets. There was more training, there were high potential programs, there were leadership programs. These programs were sponsored by banks, insurance companies, retail establishments, media establishments, not-for-profits. We all remember, you got out of college and you went into some kind of a leadership training program. You know, that just doesn't exist anymore. So from the 50s and 60s, where the emphasis was in personnel was on parties, payroll, and parking, the 70s and 80s brought us into participative management, where employees began to have a say in how things happened in companies. We had quality circles, we had Six Sigma, we had team goals and rewards, the emergence of bonus programs, cross-functional efforts and reward programs, even recognition programs. And you began to see HR professionals' compensation and importance at the table be commensurate with their peers in marketing and finance and other administrative areas. So those were the heydays of the 70s and 80s. In the 90s, the economy slipped, if you remember, 90, 91, and as that economy slipped, HR was whipsawed along with it. The new catchphrases were RIF, redundancy, downsizing, and right-sizing, and people went from being corporate assets to being expendable assets. And we can all remember that those terms which were coined, like RIF and redundancy in the 70s and 80s, became the mainstay of our vocabulary. Investment budgets were cut, investments in training and development and learning programs, leadership programs, and all those programs began to lose steam. Now, there are certainly exceptions, the GEs and the Pepsis and the Kodaks of the world, but for the most part, many of our companies and not-for-profit institutions just simply cut those programs out. We saw a similar thing happening in benefits, especially pensions, which formerly were provided by the company for retirement. The shift began to be employee-funded retirement, right, with 401ks with a match. And so benefits and pension plans were also downsized, and that trend has continued. 2001 redefined the world. After the horrific events of 9/11, we began to see much more uncertainty, timidity, confusion in business overall, and that began to pervade HR, reflecting the uncertain global economy, but also the social milieu. This was a time, and I think continues to be a time, where we struggle to define ourselves and the impact that we can have on employee engagement, employee satisfaction, and retention. A lot of the old assumptions that we had were destabilized. Investment in HR really resembles a roller coaster in the 2000s. So there's an investment in training and development, there's an investment in new benefits programs, work-life programs, and then we find that those programs are cut when the economy is bad, or when the business or the institution has a bad year. We see that there is no longer an assumption that because you do your job, you get a merit increase anymore, right? So how many of you in the last 5 years have experienced years of no merit increase? Just give me a sense of it. Right, so that's been very pervasive. The whole notion of return on investment seems to be absent from HR efforts right now. There's a lot of skepticism about investments in people programs. And I think that reflects some of what Denise talked about earlier, which is you've really got to present a case which is data-based and which speaks to some type of return. So it is important to have metrics and other measures. We continue to see cuts in benefits in company-funded retirement programs where the cost of the program goes up and the value of the program goes down. Now, we know this is only one piece of what makes people stay somewhere, right? It's one piece. A more important piece is, do I see my piece of driving this business or driving this mission or not? And if I do, I'm more likely to stay. So 70s and 80s were seen as benevolent. The 90s, I think not only the management of companies, but also the HR function began to be viewed with some skepticism and as sort of an evil force. You know, the whole Dilbert, Catbert, the evil HR director, you know, that's no mistake, right? That reflects something that's happening in the real world. And the 2000s, I think, represented by some confusion. So what? Why are we talking about all of this? What is the impact on our employees of this destabilization and cuts in the investment in people? Well, what happens is people begin to say, who knows that I'm here? Who knows what I'm doing? And if they do know, do they care? Whatever happened to that training program we used to have? Or that recognition program where people got awards or even service awards? You know, you're there for 25 years, you should get something for it, right? What is my place in this constantly shifting landscape? Why do I feel so disenfranchised? Why are they doing these stupid things to me? They just don't get it. So you've heard people say that in your companies, your institutions, and you may be saying it yourself. Employees are disenfranchised, they've lost loyalty, and it's a mutual loss of loyalty. And there are more mobile. The ultimate disengagement is to leave. So the impact on the perceptions of HR, many believe that we've become a management mouthpiece, that we're spinning the story about how 2% is a good merit increase. We've become spinning and spinning. We've become fence sitters because we don't want to piss off the wrong people. We are people pleasers because we need the emotional bank account of others to get stuff done. We become power players, evildoers. Again, they just don't get it. So let's take a look forward now, 2012 and beyond. Put the human back in human resources. And these are just some points that I'd like to make, and you all know this, but this is really important. Take the time to understand what motivates every faction of humans. The 20-somethings, the single moms, the gay lesbian contingent, my generation or my parents' generation. We want and need different things, and we will go where we need to get it. Ultimately, we may hang out for a while, retired in place, or treading water or staying under the radar, but we're eventually going to go get what we need. Involve employees in the decisions that impact their life. If you only take one thing away, this is the absolute #1 most important thing that you can do. Involve people in the decisions that impact their lives, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Be flexible within the limits of the law. Use your brain, not your fear of pissing someone off. It's important to pay attention to the law. It's really, really important. But beyond that, we should be using a rational, consistent approach. We should have the courage to take a stand, and we should be influencing the action in our entities where we work. Why? So we can be seen as a credible, balanced, empathic, and relevant function. Things are confused right now. People don't really know, what does HR do? What are they bringing to the table? So let's talk about a few of these points. One, take the time to understand and involve employees. What does that look like? So in a new systems implementation, ask the users. before you change the business process. Involve them. If it looks like upfront a year of planning for 6 months of execution, or a year and a half of planning for 6 months of execution, actually testing out the new system before it goes live, and be honest about the impact of the new system. A lot of times I hear people describing new systems as, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, it's going to make your life easier, it's going to have all kinds of capacity. And the truth is that at least during the stabilization period when you implement a new system, it's rough, and it hurts, and it's different, and I don't like it, and why did you take it away from me? So be honest up front. Say, you know what? There are going to be some benefits to this and some advantages to this, and it's going to take a shift in behavior and thinking in order to take advantage of this new system and all that it can do for us. Engage them up front, let them know what's coming, don't lie to them, all right? And that way you will find that you receive a lot of credibility as someone who's been honest and told exactly what's going to happen to them. If you look at benefits, know what the different contingents want. Some benefits are one size fits all, and others are tailored to the individual at a certain point in their life cycle. And you need to have the courage to be able to identify what those needs and wants are and to defend the change. In writing a new policy, test it out with those people it impacts before you implement it. And these are some of the things that we can do to keep people engaged and having a feeling of being able to impact their job and their workplace. Be flexible within the law. We talked about that. Just make sure that your logic, path, and values remain constant. Apply the same logic and values to each situation that you come upon. And then apply, and this kind of flexibility applies to all kinds of things, to policies, to compensation, to work-life flexibility, and other human decisions related to HR. Have the courage to defend that logic path, and don't police it, think it through. So what does that look like? In compensation, this person is above the top of their range for their salary grade. Okay, so the sort of mindless answer is no raise, right? Let's look at the more flexible way, using logic and empathy. This person is above the top of their range, the top end of their range. So the questions I need to start asking are, what is the market pay for the job? What is the employee's performance and potential? What are the reasons why we could defend going over the top of the range for this particular person, as long as we apply the same logic path and values and empathy to the person sitting next to them? How badly do we want to keep them? That is a legitimate reason to go above the top of the range. Okay? And you have to be able to say that to someone. And you have to be able to stand behind it. And so outside of comp, again, defend the rationale. And think about, it's not just the comp and going above the top of the range. What else for this person would keep them here? All right, 2 minutes. We're in good shape. And finally, influence the action. HR is really, when I say destabilize, we really don't know how far can we push anymore. Who are we representing? Are we representing the employee, or are we representing management? Are we representing the company? So I would say speak to your CEO and senior leadership and find out what they care about. Don't say you should do this so much as go to where they are, influence on their terms, find out what's important to them, and go where they are and bring them over time, slowly, to where you think they need to be to understand what it takes to motivate and keep the best people. Ask them, how can I help? And when they say something that they firmly believe, acknowledge with, you're right. And then you are where they are, and you can bring them where they need to be over time. Lose the word should, and instead say could. Not we should do this, we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do it this way. All right, so provide that flexibility. Bring compelling data, a logic path, and values. Be consistent and tenacious. As Denise said, make a case, right? Really, really important. Start with small wins and work your way up to a home run, and follow the path of least resistance. It's much easier that way. Go where senior management is, go where your client group is, go where your CEO is, and bring them along. Provide the value related to the business issue. Don't push programs. And finally, and in conclusion, what I would say is if you can operate this way, you'll go a long way towards engaging employees and structuring programs, practices, and efforts that they are on board with, that they have participated in designing, aligned to the company or the institute's business priorities. In this way, you'll capture their hearts, their minds, and most importantly, their commitment. Thank you.